Hi, I'm Natasha,
And I'm Cassandra.
and this is Strange Sisters. And today we are kicking off our Pride Month series with actually a really tragic number of cases. This is a serial killer case, which is our first serial killer case. Not a lot of people have heard of this case, which is really strange because it's around the same time as like the Zodiac and a lot of other serial killers in California. But I assume that's probably because it involves gay men, and so it didn't get as much publicity as other cases. So we wanted to honor the men who were brutally murdered for seemingly no reason at all, just for being who they are. And yeah, it's really a pretty dark episode, but we want to, bring light to cases that don't get a lot of attention. And this is one that came up when I was doing research. So
when we share stories with each other, but we try not to read too much into the other one's cases. The name of this sounds very silly from what I read. So I was like, oh, this is going to be a nice, lighthearted case. I am sorely mistaken, apparently.
yeah, no, I know it's very goofy. Like what they called him was really stupid. And there's really just a kind of minor reason why that we'll get
Okay.
into later. Because we don't even really know if this thing about him is true.
Okay.
But he was called the Doodler killer, which I kept reading as like Diddler when I first
That's what I
saw
read
it.
it as first, too.
Yeah, so I kept thinking of like Diddy, and then I'm like, okay, no, this is a very different situation.
Once I saw it was Doodler, all I could think was Doodle Bob from SpongeBob. So I was like, this
Um,
is going to be so goofy and fun. It is not.
No, yeah, and it was over a relatively short time span. So
Oh,
this was
wow.
between 1974 and 1975. And so this, as I mentioned, was a string of brutal murders that terrorized the San Francisco gay community. So the reason that he was called the Doodler is because reports had said that he sketched cartoon animals on a napkin when he was like striking up conversation with at least one of his victims, if not more, or potential victims. So beneath that really strange name is a much darker truth, and that's that at least 6 confirmed men were killed, and up to 14 men were killed by this person. Yeah, and even today, there hasn't been really any updates on the case. So this was obviously a different time when they didn't really have as advanced DNA and things like that. So that could be part of why, or there could be other reasons too that we'll get into that are not scientific related and just based on people's biases and beliefs,
That's what I
unfortunately.
had feeling that was going to go towards.
Yeah. So
People are awful. Just in general.
just like they're human, it doesn't matter that they were gay. So yeah, so like I said, this was definitely like a moment in time in California, both for serial killers, but also the LGBTQ plus community was still very like criminalized and pathologized and expected to suffer in silence. And the American Psychiatric Association had only just stopped classifying homosexuality as a mental disorder in 1973. Yeah, so it's like very much like people still could not wrap their heads around homosexuality and people being gay. And San Francisco was really like a safe haven back then for a lot of the LGBTQ plus community because there was a lot of folks in the community that lived there, and it felt like a place where they could be themselves. So what they called the Castro, I guess, was like a part of town where a lot of people would hang out. And Harvey Milk would be elected soon, and he was the first openly gay man to hold public office in the US. So that was definitely like the place to be if you were gay back in the 70s.
Yeah.
But of course, safety, it's always relative, right? Like it's
Yeah.
like safer community, but there's still a lot of danger, unfortunately.
There still
And
is, to this day, a lot of danger.
yes, yeah, exactly. Well, I feel like there was a big shift, and then it kind of like shifted backwards with
I 100%
recent
agree with that.
political things and people, just being terrible, unfortunately. So during this time, despite this community all living in the same place and kind of looking out for each other, not everyone was looking out for them. And so, like, gay bars were often raided by the police, and patrons were often beaten, seemingly for no reason at all. The police had a policy against hiring openly gay officers, and so when gay men started to turn up dead, most of the city just looked the other way, right? Yeah. And this was before the AIDS pandemic.
They've had a rough go of it, and still are having a rough go of it.
Yeah, so this began, as far as we know, because right, we said there could be more people that have not been confirmed victims of this person, but it seems like it began on January 27th of 1974 at 1:57 a.m. Police received an anonymous call that a man's body had been found on Ocean Beach. He was fully clothed, he had $20 in his pocket, and he had 17 stab wounds, including defensive wounds on his left hand. So he was fighting back.
Of course.
Yeah, and he was later identified as Gerald Earl Kavanaugh, a 50-year-old Catholic man from Canada. He worked at a mattress factory and had never married. And some believe that he may have been seen in a nightclub earlier that night. So it seemed like that was a theme, that this killer was meeting people at like nightclubs. And then, they're like, oh, let's leave and go back to my place, or let's go to this place. I guess there were these parks where a lot of like men would go to hook up. Like that's how it is with couples, young couples and stuff too.
Like a lover's lane, but because they're gay, they can't call it that.
Yeah, like more kind of hidden and off the beaten path, I guess. Which reminded me of American Horror Story. I don't know if it was the stories or it was like a shortened version, but there was one where they were covering crimes against like gay men back in the day, and they were meeting up at Central Park. Not that I should get my historical facts from American Horror Story, but it seemed like that's a theme, that people were meeting up in parks and stuff like that.
I've definitely heard that, but I think I've seen that also shown in like crime shows where it's a lot of, especially even in the earlier 2000s to get closer to our time, it was still always just very much hush hush.
Yeah, and another thing that you'll see is a lot of these guys, and I don't think this was necessarily on purpose, but just kind of a sign of the times, is that a lot of these guys were from different parts of the country or different countries. So because San Francisco was kind of like a mecca for this community, there's people from all over the world that ended up becoming victims of this killer. So it's a very just tragic case. So just 5 months later, on June 25th, a young woman walking her dog near Golden State Park spotted another body, this time at Spreckles Lake. So this is another park area by water. The man was Joseph J. Stevens, who was a beloved drag queen and who had once headlined at the famed club Finocchio's. I guess Finocchio's is a slur in Italian, but apparently the owner of the bar like embraced it, and it was like a big place that the gay community would hang out. I guess it wasn't exclusively a gay bar, but it was just like they were welcome. So I thought that was kind of interesting because apparently it means like the F word in Italian. So
yeah, I could see that.
Strange times. And so Jay had been stabbed 3 times and dragged from where he was attacked. So I guess maybe to just get him out of view, but then he was still found by someone. And it seemed like it was a pretty savage attack by someone who had a lot of rage. And he was last seen leaving a cabaret club with a tall, lanky black man. So again, leaving from a club with someone.
Yeah.
And then 2 weeks later, another body was found. And this body was found by a dog who was on a walk with an owner near the intersection of Golden Gate Park and Ocean Beach. So again, another park. And this person was stabbed 15 times with a deep slash to his throat. And it seemed like the killer had attempted to decapitate him. So it's kind of interesting because usually they'll say that you'll see like an escalation. So the first one having so many stab wounds, and then the second one having fewer, and then the next one having so many, and like clearly escalation with trying to decapitate this man. It's just interesting escalation or progression.
You've already committed 2 murders at minimum. So the third one, I think by that point that this wasn't like a 1-off, 2-off. You're going to do it again. You think you would be like, okay, let me bring something if I'm planning on decapitating them. Or at least be smarter about it.
I don't know. Like, we'll kind of get into like his pathology, but it seems like it was maybe an act of like self-hate.
Yeah.
So maybe it's like just the way that they interact with them. I don't know. Maybe with Jay, it just happened that he hit the right spot and he died really quickly, or maybe there was someone coming, right? And that's why he dragged him off the trail. So, yeah, unfortunately, we have very few answers on this case. And so the man that had nearly been decapitated, his name was Klaus Kreisman. He was married, he had 2 children, he was originally from Germany, and he had only been in the US for 3 months.
Klaus is a very German name.
Yeah, Klaus Kreisman. So who knows? Like, he could have just been there on business. Maybe he was visiting here to kind of explore his sexuality.
He was still in Germany.
It seemed like it. Yeah, it seemed like he was here by himself. And so he was also last seen alive at a nearby club. And when he was found, he was wearing only orange bikini briefs and had makeup in his pocket.
I'm not laughing because it's funny. It's just the orange.
I know, the orange, yeah.
You would think that would make him so easy to be spotted.
Yeah. So it doesn't really seem like he's doing a very good job of hiding them, because they're being found pretty quickly, right? Except for one.
Klaus's family. Imagine getting that phone call being like, hey, your husband murdered, maybe gay too. Good luck, God bless.
Yeah,
do you think that the police handled that with any tact at all?
I doubt it. I mean, they might have honestly not even told her. Yeah. Maybe they didn't even speak to her directly, because if she only spoke German, maybe they went through like a police department in Germany and it just kind of was relayed to her that way. Like, who knows? And all 3 of these men were stripped of identification and some property, but like I said, like the first guy had $20 in his pocket. This last guy, Klaus, had some makeup. So it's not like the killer was taking everything. He was just taking their identification. So I don't know if that was like a trophy thing, or he was trying to delay them identifying the victims. Yeah, he was not taking everything. So again, that's kind of strange. And one thing that they did believe right off the bat was that this wasn't a random act of violence. Because my first thought was, maybe it's someone that's like hanging out by gay bars, targeting people that are seen coming out of gay bars or something like that. But the police thought that they all seemed very personal, especially with how aggressive and brutal the killings were.
Yeah.
It didn't just seem so much like a random act. And that also, like I mentioned, it was likely motivated by shame and self-hate. So the killer was probably grappling with his own sexuality and then projected that hatred outward in the most violent way possible. And the media largely ignored the case, of course, until the Sentinel, which was San Francisco's gay newspaper, began reporting on the killings. So these people are really in danger, and like the media is not covering it. So if you didn't know one of these victims, you might not even know what was going on. So really, like, the Sentinel did a huge service to their community by putting information out there. And business owners and Harvey Milk began pushing police to act, but it wasn't until September 29th, 1974, which was 9 months after the first murder, that a detective named Rotea Guilford, San Francisco's first Black homicide investigator, took charge. So
you can't. It's so frustrating because I know you can't see the faces I'm making, but of course it took a minority to try to help another minority.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
People are the worst.
Yeah. So that same day, the body of George Gilbert, who was a Wells Fargo employee, was found in his apartment. He was into the leather scene, I guess, and being tied up, and was known to frequent like the city's leather bars. And when he was found, he had been stabbed 7 times, and the killer had also ripped apart his leather clothing.
It's just like insult to injury at that point. Do you know how expensive? Don't ask why I know, but do you know how expensive that stuff is?
Oh, I know. Leather clothing is so expensive, obviously, because
leather. But it's also hard to cut up. I mean, like a leather vest or leather jacket, that's hard to destroy.
Yeah, so he must have had a very sharp knife.
Yeah. And a lot of rage.
Yeah. And since he was in the apartment, there was a little more privacy too. So, and then came Frederick Elmer Kappen, who was a Navy veteran and Vietnam War medic. And he was found on May 12th, 1975, 2 miles south of Golden Gate Park, and he was found dead behind some sand dunes. He had also been dragged 20 feet, and so again, he was kind of taken maybe out of the view of the general public, and he had a stab wound to his aorta and his heart. So maybe the guy is figuring out
But
more of.
he was a veteran. That is not an easy, like. Did they do talk screens on all of these men? I'm assuming they didn't.
I don't think so. I didn't see anything about that. Are you thinking like maybe they were drugged or something like that?
I'm thinking it's going to be hard to take down a Navy vet.
Yeah, you would think. I have a feeling that they were in like vulnerable situations, positions.
Gotcha.
I don't know if it was like a thing where he's like telling them, "Oh, get on your stomach."
Yeah.
Uh, Unfortunately, there's
Well, no.
so little known about these because there wasn't much of an investigation done in the beginning. So, and then we have the oldest confirmed victim, who was Harold Goldberg, and he was found nearly a month later. He was 66 years old, and he was a Swedish sailor. So again, he was probably a pretty tough dude, and he had been dead for 2 weeks. So
It's awful.
he was found nearly a month later, but he had already been dead for 2 weeks. So this one was, I guess, he was pretty well hidden. And his pants and underwear had been removed, and cause of death for him was a vicious slash across his neck. So it
So
seemed
he,
like he was doing less of the stabbing over time, like maybe making it a little bit quicker for whatever
it
reason.
also seems like they're getting more humiliating. Like he left them.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's definitely going more into like the self hatred rather than just violence. Because like, why are you gonna murder and humiliate a 66-year-old man?
Yeah, it's really sick. All of these are really sick. And they're just left in nature. I don't know if he was hoping that maybe animals would get to them too, maybe by trying to hide them a little bit more. Maybe that's what he was hoping. I don't know.
I mean, I
Um,
don't know much about San Francisco in general, so I don't really know what kind of animals where they were found that would be getting them.
yeah, I don't know. I would assume there's probably like coyotes and mountain lions in the area,
Okay.
um, because they tend to be even in more like urban areas. But with so many people around, they probably don't frequent there too often. It didn't sound like they were too far off the beaten path where they would be like in wilderness, you know?
Yeah.
So who knows? There's been so many victims and no arrests, no real leads. That is until three survivors came forward. So there were three men who
Okay.
had escaped. Yeah. And I think probably because of the Sentinel and them putting out information about this person, they probably learned more about what was going on and then could come forward and say, hey, I think I like escaped from this guy. So unfortunately, these men were all, I guess, what you would consider like upper society. So they were very concerned about their reputation and did not want to participate really at all in the investigation. So, yeah, we'll kind of get into it, but like, had they participated, they might have actually been able to confirm the identity of this guy and like put him behind bars.
They couldn't protect their I mean, I keep saying that like I'm expecting them to do their job properly, but like they couldn't have attempted to protect their identity.
Yeah, I don't know if it was a thing where like they didn't want to have to testify in court or something like that. That's what I'm thinking, but I don't know exactly how that works. So the first potential victim was a European diplomat, and he recalled being approached by a young black man in a diner who asked if he had any cocaine. So I guess that was just like a thing back then. You see a
Doing the
rich
right
guy.
bar now, it's still a thing.
Yeah. Especially if you see like a rich guy, like I guess you might just assume that.
No, the second time that it's been an African American gentleman seen with them.
Yes,
Okay.
young black guy. Yeah. And so they talked while the man doodled cartoons on a napkin.
Okay.
And so that's where this name came from. And I guess he also claimed that he was like a cartoon artist or something like that. And they went back to the diplomat's apartment, and the man, I guess, suddenly attacked him. So this person actually was a victim, but he did not get killed. He was stabbed 6 times, but he survived. Um,
Goodness.
yeah, so I don't know why this wasn't connected right away.
Did he like attempt to get authorities involved, or is he just kind of like, this is what they do to gay people here, I guess?
Yeah, I don't know. And because of his like diplomat status, like maybe he just went to the hospital, said it
Yeah.
was like a random stabbing or something like that, and just got treatment and didn't tell the police. I'm not really sure. So, I mean, you can kind of understand why you wouldn't want to I guess, get into how you met this person,
Yeah. I mean, they would probably prefer you saying that you were giving them blow than you being gay. So I did
Yeah.
not mean to itch my nose after saying that.
Um, and the second man, who all we know about him is that he was a well known actor, he escaped before the man could strike. So he ran as soon as he saw that the guy had a knife. So he was able to get away, but he also described what this guy looked like. And then a third guy who was another, prominent figure. So this one kind of seemed like maybe a politician. He chose not to speak publicly and left San Francisco soon after. So he did talk to police, but then he left the area right away. And none of them were willing to press charges because
That's,
the fear of being outed was too powerful.
so this guy seems like he has a type though too. People who definitely are in like of higher power who would have a lot to lose getting caught.
Yeah, and maybe the other men that he did end up attacking seemed wealthy. I don't know
Yeah.
exactly, what was going on there. But yeah, he definitely, I think in general, people didn't want to be outed back then. Unless you were very, living out loud kind of thing. I think most people wanted to just, go about their daily lives and then
Exist.
at night maybe kind of cut loose a little bit.
Now we're
Um,
thinking the one guy was a famous, well-known actor though. So this
mhm.
guy had to have known who he was when he attacked him.
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
He probably did. Yeah. And the politician, I would guess as well, he probably knew who that guy was.
Good idea. Like if he wants to definitely like at least attack, and if he doesn't succeed in killing them, know that he's never going to get arrested for it.
Yeah. Or maybe there was some kind of blackmail involved. Who knows? Then finally, a break came. In July of 1975, an anonymous woman called the police. She gave this guy's name to the police.
Oh, great.
And then a few days later, she called back and gave them his address and his age. So, yeah, maybe she just felt like they were taking too long, or maybe there were a lot of people that had similar names. Who knows?
Yeah. Or maybe she lived like in the community nearby. So maybe that had something to do with it. Like, hey, I've seen this guy a lot. We live really near this place.
Yeah, of course you don't want something like that in your community.
Yeah.
And you'll see who the woman was. So the suspect, his description was a young black man between 19 and 25. And he was placed under surveillance because they didn't really have any evidence other than that. And the woman who called, she actually worked at a psychiatrist's office and recognized him as a patient of her boss.
So technically, she's not breaking HIPAA.
Yeah, because it wasn't her patient. It was just someone that came into the office that she worked at.
Yeah.
But soon the psychiatrist also called the police. And the suspect, he said, had confessed to the murders during therapy.
Well,
But that
throw HIPAA
confession
out the window.
that confession was protected by doctor patient privilege. And so they couldn't use that, I guess, against him in court. And so
Huh.
other than that, there just really wasn't any evidence. And so they didn't really have anything to charge him. And they did do a lineup where one of the survivors identified him, but the two others refused to look at the lineup. So had another survivor confirmed the identity, then they would actually have had something to go off of, I guess. And what's even more frustrating is that Detective Guilford later shared that the man still lived in the Bay Area. He had a girlfriend and he claimed to be reformed or cured by therapy, and he denied involvement in any killing. So he admitted that he was interested in being gay or had possible
Can't
feelings for
pray the gay away.
yeah, so that's what he told them. But he denied ever being involved in the killings. And this was something that Detective Guilford told the Sentinel so that I guess people would kind of stay alert because this guy was still out there. And so, like I said, there was a certain amount of confirmed victims, but there could have been a lot more. So in 2022, so pretty recently, police added a sixth confirmed victim to the case. His name was Warren Andrews, and he was attacked with a rock and a tree branch near Land's End, and he died a couple weeks later. So he didn't die right away. And the police theorized that maybe he had taken him down there to attack him. He probably had his knife, but maybe in the struggle he lost the knife, and so he just used what was around, which was a tree branch. So they just connected him to this case in 2022.
Oh, that's heartbreaking. I mean, I'm so glad at least he's connected now, but 2022.
Yeah, such a long time later. And then there were other victims too, like Nick Bauman, who was known as Granny Goose. I know, it's such a cute name. He was found tortured and murdered in a basement. So they think that maybe he was also a victim of him, but they don't know for sure.
Start with Granny Goose and end with murdered and tortured in a basement. Like, that can't be a sentence you say.
Yeah, it's really sad. So they theorize that maybe the Doodler was responsible for their deaths, but because of how much time has passed, it's hard to say for sure without any kind of confession. So his violence was allowed to continue because the victims were gay men and the system saw them as disposable. And so there could be even more victims than 14. Like, they really don't know. There could have been victims from before that they didn't know about. There could be victims after. He could still be active today. We don't really know.
I mean, how old would he be today? If he was like, let's say I am 25 in the 70s. Trying to
So if
like,
he was like 20 in 1975, he would be 70 now.
7-year-olds can be serial killers, I guess.
Yeah, and they can also be alive, and they can also make deathbed confessions. So we can only hope that he will come forward at some point. And like I was saying, we don't exactly know how many of the deaths or victims could be attributed to him, because by the end of 1975, at least 131 LGBTQ plus people had been murdered in San Francisco.
In San Francisco.
That's what that seemed like. I mean, I believe that.
I would say I don't doubt it for a second. It's just heartbreaking.
Yeah, that's what I read. And at first I was like, is that just in San Francisco? Is that in the whole country? But I think it was just in the San Francisco area.
Too many, but that many is too many.
Yeah, it's a lot. And especially in San Francisco, where it's one of the few places that offered any sort of refuge for this community. It was devastating. They couldn't feel safe because the police weren't, investigating it really or taking it seriously. A lot of the other people in the community might not have supported them. So, they really had to look out for each other, and that was kind of all they had.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so today, there has been a renewed interest in the case, and it has been reopened. So,
Good.
Yeah, so Detective Dan Cunningham has been providing updates every year. They are trying to, figure things out, but it's pretty difficult considering that the evidence is 50 years old and a lot of people that may have been witnesses could be dead by now, unfortunately. But there is a $250,000 reward for information that leads to an arrest. So if you know something, please come forward with the victims. And
come on, it's Pride Month.
Yeah,
somebody has to know something.
It's Pride Month. And what's interesting too is they have made some progressive renderings to show what the suspect might look like today. And they did recover DNA from 2 of the scenes. I don't think they've done anything quite yet with that DNA, but that could also possibly lead to them finally getting justice. So until then, kind of just hoping that someone will come forward.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Unfortunately, this story is kind of centered around this killer, but really the victims should be the ones that are talked about and celebrated.
And their families are probably still heartbroken.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's likely that their parents passed away without knowing whatever happened to them.
And not even just in that time period, not even just the blood families, their chosen families, their community is probably still heartbroken to this day.
Yeah. And unfortunately, it was probably just one of many people that the remaining community lost. There was a lot of, like I said, there was a lot of police brutality, a lot of people that did not support the gay lifestyle. So that community has really been through a lot. And it seemed like they had their guy and they just couldn't get a conviction because people were too afraid to speak up. But like we were saying, I mean, those people are older now too. So at this point, what have you got to lose, really?
Not as a lighthearted case as I thought it was going to be based off the name.
I know, it's such a stupid name. I would kind of.
If they did that partially because it sounds so unassuming compared to all the other serial killers at the time that were getting attention.
Yeah, it kind of reflects how not seriously they were taking the case.
Yeah.
Until Detective Guilford came in. So, yeah, their lives mattered. And during Pride Month, want to remember not just how they died, which was terrible,
Yeah.
but who they were. They were veterans, performers, fathers. They were immigrants coming to the US looking for a better life, looking to find their community. And they were so marginalized, like in all these other places, that they probably felt maybe even a little bit more relaxed just being in San Francisco and knowing that there were other people like them around. And then for something like this to happen, it's just heartbreaking. And yeah, we'll definitely keep talking about cases that have affected the LGBTQ plus community this month and moving forward as well. But especially during this month, we wanted to highlight those. And yeah, I mean, even now, people are still living in fear.
Yeah.
I don't know how much we can influence people that are causing that fear, but we can continue to just emphasize that they are human beings and there's nothing wrong with them. They don't need to be fixed. Just let them be who they are.
Just leave everybody alone. It's none of your business. If you're not having sex with them, it's none of your business.
Yeah.
I have such a hard time with I have a hard time with homophobia and racism in general, as everyone should.
Yes.
But it's none of your business.
It has nothing to do with you.
The world's literally on fire. Who do you care who I'm having sex with?
And it shouldn't be. I mean, these are things that governments and oligarchies have used across time to control people. It should be more of a class. Oh, sorry. I don't know if you saw that.
No.
I put up these sound dampening panels with command strips because I saw some guy do it and he was like, yeah, it works really well. So I was like, okay. So I did it, but it's not sticking and they all just keep fluttering.
No, I didn't see it. I did not see that.
That's funny. One of them came kind of close. I forgot what I was saying, but yeah.
How the government shouldn't be involved in it at all. As long as everyone's consenting adults, the government really does not need to be involved.
And we need to come together because realistically, we're all mostly poor people, that are being stomped down. Instead of fighting amongst ourselves, we got to come together and fight against the powers that are controlling us. But the burden shouldn't be on these marginalized communities, and it should be on us, white, white straight people. We need to advocate more.
Literal worst people.
Yeah. So if you're straight and white this month, especially fight for your LGBTQ friends and community.
Everyone stop being a fucking dick. That's pretty much.
At the very least, just mind your own business, Yeah. But we should need to be doing more.
Yeah, everyone needs to be doing more.
Yeah. So we'll do definitely more cases like that in the future. We are focusing on unsolved cases, so unfortunately there really are no happy endings for these. So, can understand if you don't enjoy listening to them. Oh my god, another panel just fell.
I'm waiting for one to fall on your head. You're like, yeah, so all these people were murdered and we haven't found them, and you just...
I was waiting for one because one did flutter down earlier when I was setting them up. I'm like, oh my god. So yeah, I'll have to get some sticky spray or something. I was just trying not to do damage to my walls.
At least we can laugh a little bit at the end of a very tragic, horrible, horrible case. And I will try on my spooky end to do something a little more lighthearted for the next one. And one day we'll get the apocalypse before the apocalypse, maybe. I know I've mentioned before, I watch a lot of British YouTubers, just cute commentary videos. And a lot of them are British guys around my age or a little younger. And they're like, we know all Americans aren't bad, but you guys, the way that you look at Florida is the way the rest of the world looks at you.
Damn.
As somebody who's dated a guy from Florida, that hurts. I feel personally attacked by that message.
Yeah, that's rough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I want you all to marinate on that until our next podcast.
Yeah, that felt like a punch in the gut. Wow. All right. Well, yes. Anything else to say?
Be nice to your neighbors. Don't be a dick and stay strange.